Bambi was often left alone now, but he did not have the same fear of it as he had the first time. His mother would disappear, and then, however much he called for her, she did not come. But then she would reappear unexpectedly. One evening, feeling very lonely, he wandered once more along the paths. He had not found Gobo and Feline even once. The sky had already turned to a light gray, and it was beginning to get dark, so that the tops of the trees could be seen over the bushes and undergrowth. Something rustled in the bushes. Something hurtled its way between the leaves. And then his mother appeared. Close behind her, another deer made its way in. Bambi did not know who it was. Auntie Ina, or his father, or someone else. But Bambi's mother saw immediately who it was, despite the speed at which she had rushed past him. He heard the shrillness of her voice. She screamed, and it seemed to Bambi that she did so only in fun, but then it occurred to him that there was a slight ring of fear in that scream. Another time, it happened in full daylight. Bambi had been walking for hours through the dense woods and finally began to call, not so much because he was afraid, but because he did not want to remain so alone anymore. And he felt he would soon be in a terrible state, so he began to call for his mother. Suddenly, there was one of their fathers standing in front of him, looking at him severely. Bambi had not heard him coming, and he was startled. This elder stag looked more powerful than the others. He was taller and more proud. His coat was aflame with a deep dark red, but his face shone silver gray, and a powerful black pearled crown extended high above his playful ears. "What are you calling for?" the old stag asked severely. Bambi trembled in awe of the elder stag and did not dare to make any answer. "Your mother hasn't got the time to spend on you now," the elder continued. Bambi was completely cowed by this imperious voice, but at the same time, he felt admiration for it. "Can't you be by yourself for a while? You should be ashamed of yourself." Bambi would have liked to say that he could be by himself perfectly well, that he had often been by himself, but he said nothing. He did as he was told and became terribly ashamed. The elder turned round and left him. Bambi did not know how the stag left, where he had gone, did not even know whether he had left quickly or slowly. He was simply gone, just as suddenly as he had arrived. Bambi strained his ears, but he heard no steps moving away from him, no leaf being disturbed. That made him suppose the elder must be quite near to him, and he smelt the air on every side. He learned nothing from that. Bambi sighed in relief as he was once more alone, but at the same time, he yearned to see the old stag again and to make sure he was not displeased with him. Then his mother arrived, but Bambi said nothing about his meeting with the elder, nor did he ever call for her now when she was out of sight. He thought about the old stag when he wandered about on his own. He felt a powerful wish to come across him. Then he would say to him, "See, I'm not calling for anyone," and the elder would praise him. He did speak to Gobo and Feline, though, the next time they were together on the meadow. They listened with excitement, and they had had no experience of their own that could compare with this. "Weren't you scared?" asked Gobo excitedly. "Yes," Bambi admitted. He had been scared, just a little bit. "I'd have been terribly scared," Gobo told him. Bambi answered that no, he had not been very scared because the elder had been so majestic. Gobo told him, "That wouldn't have been much help for me. I'd have been too scared to even look at him. When I get scared, everything flickers in front of my eyes so that I can't see anything, and my heart beats so hard that I can't breathe." What Bambi had told them made Feline very thoughtful, and she said nothing. The next time they met, though, Gobo and Feline rushed to him in great leaps and bounds. They were alone once more, as was Bambi. "We've been looking for you for ages," declared Gobo. "Yes," said Feline with an air of importance, "as now we know exactly who it was that you saw." Bambi was so keen to know he jumped in the air. "Who?" Feline took pleasure in saying, "It was the old prince." "How do you know that?" Bambi wanted to know. "Our mother told us," retorted Feline. Bambi was astonished, and he showed it. "Did you tell her about it then?" The two of them nodded their heads. "But that was a secret," objected Bambi. Gobbo quickly tried to excuse himself. "It wasn't me. It was Feline who did it." But Feline cheerfully called, "Oh, so what? Secret. I wanted to know who it was, and now we know, and that's much more interesting." Bambi was burning to hear all about this, and his wish was satisfied. Feline told him everything. "He's the most noble stag in the whole wood. He's the prince. There is no second most noble. No one comes near to him. No one knows how old he is. No one knows where he lives. No one knows who his relatives are. Very few have ever even seen him. Now and then there's a rumor that he's dead because he hasn't been seen for a long time. Then somebody catches a glimpse of him, and then everyone knows he's still alive. No one has ever dared to ask him where he's been. He doesn't speak to anyone, and no one dares to speak to him. He goes along the paths where no one else ever goes. He knows every part of the wood, even the most distant corner, and nothing is a danger to him. Other princes might tussle with each other sometimes as a test or in fun, but sometimes they fight in earnest. It's many years since he fought with anyone, and there's no one still alive who did fight with him a long time ago. He's the great prince." Bambi forgave Gobbo and Feline for having carelessly chatted about his secret with their mother. He was even quite satisfied about it now. After all, it was him who had experienced all these important things. Nonetheless, he was glad that Gobbo and Feline did not know everything quite precisely that the great prince had said. "Can't you be by yourself for a while?" That they did not know, he had said, "You should be ashamed of yourself." Bambi was glad now that he had kept silent about these admonitions. Bambi was glad now that he had kept silent about those admonitions. Feline would have told her mother about that just like everything else, and then the whole forest would have been gossiping about it. That night, as the moon was rising, Bambi's mother came back again. She was suddenly standing there under the great oak at the edge of the meadow and looking round for Bambi. He saw her straight away and ran over to her. That night, Bambi had another new experience. His mother was tired and hungry. She did not walk about as much as she usually did, but satisfied herself there on the meadow where Bambi also usually took his meals. Together there they munched on the bushes, and as they did so, in that remarkably pleasant way, they wandered deeper and deeper into the woods. There was a loud noise that came through the greenery. Before Bambi had any idea of what was happening, his mother began to scream loudly, just as she did when she was greatly startled or confused. "Oh!" she screamed, jumped away, then stopped and screamed, "Oh! Oh!" Then Bambi saw some immense figures appear, coming toward them through the noise. They came quite close. They looked like Bambi and his mother, Auntie Anna, and anyone else of their species, but they were enormous. They had grown so big and powerful that you felt compelled to look up at them. Like his mother, Bambi began to scream, "Bow! Bow! Bow!" He was hardly aware that he was screaming. He could not stop himself. The line of figures went slowly past, 3 or 4 enormous figures, one after another. Last of all came one that was even bigger than the others. It had a wild mane around its neck, and its head was crowned with a whole tree. Just to see it took your breath away. Bambi stood there and howled as loudly as he could, as he felt more frightened and bewildered than he ever had been before. His fear was of a peculiar kind. He felt as if he were pitifully small, and even his mother seemed to be the same. He felt ashamed, although he had no idea why. At the same time, the horror of it shook him, and he once more began to howl, "Bow! Bow!" It made him feel better when he shouted like that. The line of figures had passed. There was nothing more to see, and nothing more to hear from them. Even Bambi's mother became silent. There was only Bambi, who would whine briefly from time to time. He was still afraid. "You can be quiet now," his mother said. "Look, they've gone away." "Oh, Mother," whispered Bambi. "Who was that?" "Oh, they're not really that dangerous," his mother said. "They were our big relatives. Yes, they are big, and their quality, much higher quality than you or me." "And aren't they dangerous?" Bambi asked. "Not normally," his mother explained. But they say there are many things that have happened. People say this and that about them, but I don't know if there's any truth in these stories. They've never done anything to me or to anyone I know."
"Why would they do anything to us when they're relatives of ours?"
thought Bambi. He wanted to be quiet, but he was still shaking. "No, I don't suppose they'll do anything to us," his mother answered. "But I'm not sure, and I get alarmed every time I see them. I can't stop myself. It's the same every time." Bambi was slowly soothed down by this conversation, but he remained thoughtful. Right above him, in among the branches of an alder tree, an impressive tawny owl shrieked. But Bambi was confused and forgot for once to show that he was startled. The owl, however, still came down to him and asked, "Gave you a shock, did I?"
"Of course,"
answered Bambi.
"You always give me a shock."
The owl gave a quiet laugh. He was satisfied. "I hope you don't blame me for it," he said. "It's just the way I do things." He fluffed up his plumage till he looked like a ball, sank his beak into his soft downy feathers, and put on a terribly nice, serious expression. That was enough for him. Bambi opened his heart to him.
"Do you know,"
he began in a way that seemed older than his age,
"I've just had a shock that was far bigger than the one you gave me."
"What?" asked the owl, no longer satisfied with himself. Bambi told him about his meeting with his enormous relatives. "Don't tell me about your relatives," declared the owl. "I've got relatives too, you know, but all I have to do is look around me anywhere in the daytime and they're all over me. Nah, there's not much point in having relatives. If they're bigger than you, they're good for nothing, and if they're smaller, they're even more good for nothing. If they're bigger than you, then you can't stand them, 'cause they're so haughty. And if they're smaller, they can't stand you 'cause they think you're haughty. Nah, I don't want to know anything about anything of that."
"But I don't even know my relatives,"
said Bambi shyly, and wishing he did.
"I'd never heard anything about them, and today was the first time I saw them."
"Don't you bother about those people," the owl advised him. "Just take my word for it," he said, rolling his eyes in a meaningful way. "Take my word, that's the best thing to do. Relatives are never as good as friends. Look at the two of us. We're not related, but we're good friends, aren't we? And very nice it is, too." Bambi was about to say something more, but the owl continued speaking. "I've got some experience in things like that. You're a bit young still. Take my word, I know better about these things. And anyway, I don't see why I should get involved in your family matters." He rolled his eyes, and rolled them in a way that seemed so thoughtful, and sat with an expression that seemed so thoughtful and meaningful that Bambi was modest and said nothing. Another night went by, and the following day something else happened. The sky was cloudless, and the morning was full of dew and freshness. All the leaves on the trees and the bushes suddenly had a more vivid scent. The meadow breathed the air in broad waves and lifted it up to the treetops.
"Peep,"
said the tits as they woke up. They said it quite quietly, but as it was still twilight and the sky was gray, they said nothing more for a little while. For a time, there was silence. Then the raucous, rasping sound of a crow came from high up in the air. The crows had woken up and were visiting each other in the treetops. The magpie answered straight back, "Shack-a-rack-shack! Can you believe this? I'm still asleep!" Then hundreds of calls here and there, far and near, tentatively began.
"Peep, peep, to you!"
These sounds still had something of sleep, something of the twilight about them, and yet they were actually all quite distinct from each other. Suddenly, a blackbird flew to the top of a fir tree. He flew right up to the very highest, thinnest point, reaching into the air. He sat up high there and looked out over all the other trees, near and far, while the pale gray sky, still tired from the night, began to glow in the east and come to life. Then the bird began to sing. She was only a tiny dark spot if you glimpsed her from the ground. In the distance, her little black body looked like a wilted leaf. But her song spread out all over the forest in great celebration. And then everything came to life. The finches struck up, and the robins and the goldfinches made their voices heard. Pigeons rushed from one place to another with wide flapping and swishing of their wings. The pheasants shouted out as if their throats would burst. The sound of their wings was gentle but powerful as they swooped down to the earth from the trees where they had been sleeping. On the ground, they repeated their metallic bursting cry many more times, and then they would coo gently. High in the sky, the falcons called out their sharp and joyful "ya, ya, ya." The sun had risen.
"Dee-oo, dee-oo,"
rejoiced the oriole. As he flew back and forth between the twigs and branches, his round yellow body shone in the beams of the morning sun like an exhilarated ball of gold. Bambi stepped under the big oak tree on the meadow. It sparkled in the morning dew, had a scent of grass, flowers, and wet earth. It whispered of the 1,000 lives it had led. There sat Bambi's friend, the hare, and he seemed to be thinking about something very important. There was a haughty pheasant there, walking slowly. He pecked at the stalks of grass and looked carefully all around himself. His dark blue neck sparkled in the sunlight like a jewel necklace. But close in front of Bambi there stood one of the princes, very near to him. Bambi had never seen him before, had never even seen any of the fathers this close up. He stood there before him, very close to a hazel bush and still slightly concealed behind its twigs. Bambi did not move. He hoped the prince would come out fully from behind the bush, and he wondered whether he could dare to speak to him. He wanted to ask his mother, and glanced around for her, but his mother had already gone ahead and stood a long way away with Auntie Aina. Just then, Gobo and Feline came out of the woods and ran onto the meadow. Bambi did not move, but wondered about what he should do. If he wanted to get over to his mother and the others, he would have to pass by the prince. He thought that would be unseemly. So what? He thought. I don't need to get my mother's permission first. It was the old prince who spoke to me first, and I didn't tell my mother anything about it. I will speak to the prince. I'll see if I can. I'll say to him, "Good morning, Your Highness." There's nothing about that might make him cross, and if he is, I can just run away. Bambi wondered whether he had made the right decision, and it kept on making him feel unsteady on his feet. Now the prince stepped away from the hazel bush and onto the meadow. Now, thought Bambi. Just then, there was a loud clap of thunder. Bambi recoiled and did not know what had happened. He saw how the prince jumped high into the air in front of him, and saw him rush past him into the woods. Bambi looked hard all around him. He felt as if he could still hear the thunderclap. He saw his mother, Auntie Aina, Gobo, and Feline some way away had fled into the woods. He saw his friend the hare rush away in panic, saw the pheasant run away with his neck stretched out ahead of him, and he could not understand what it all could be about. The prince lay there. A broad wound had torn his shoulder open. He was bloody and dead. "Don't just stand there!" came a shrill cry from beside him. It was his mother, who was running at a full gallop. "Run!" she called. "Run as fast as you can!" She did not stop, but rushed on, and her command pulled Bambi along with her. He ran with all his strength.
"What is that, Mother?" he asked. "What was that, Mother?"
His mother, gasping for breath, answered, "That was him." Bambi shuddered, and they ran on. Finally, out of breath, they stopped. "What do you say? Please, what do you say?" called a thin voice from above them. Bambi looked up and saw the squirrel hurrying down to them through the branches of the tree. "I jumped all the way here beside you," he called. "No, it's terrible." "Were you there when it happened?" asked Bambi's mother. "Well, of course I was there," the squirrel replied. "I'm still shaking from it. All my limbs are shaking." He sat upright, his magnificent flag against his back, showing his slender white breast and pressing both his front paws against his body to reassure himself. "I am quite beside myself with fear." "I'm afraid too, and it's made me quite numb," said Bambi's mother. "I can't understand it. None of us saw anything." "Really?" The squirrel became excited. "You're wrong there, you know. I'd been watching him for a long time." "So had I," called another voice. It was the magpie. She flew up to them and sat down on a branch. "And me," called another screeching voice from even higher in the ash tree. There was the jay sitting there. And from the very tops of the trees, there was a pair of crows who cawed angrily. "We saw him too," they interjected. They all sat round in earnest discussion. They were exceptionally agitated, and it seemed full of anger and fear. Who, thought Bambi, would they have seen?
I did everything I possibly could do, the squirrel assured them as he pressed both his forepaws to his heart. Really, everything to bring him to the attention of the poor prince. So did I, the jay screeched. I don't know how many times I shouted to him, but he just didn't want to hear me.
He didn't hear me either, the magpie said with a laugh. 10 times it was I called to him. Just as I was going to fly over to him, I thought to myself, well, if he can't hear me, I'll fly over onto that hazel bush just where he's standing. He's got to hear me from there. But that was just when it happened.
But my voice is louder than yours, and I did all I could to warn him, said the crow in a bitter tone. But you posh lot never give enough attention to birds like us.
Yes, never enough at all, agreed the squirrel. We do what we can, thought the magpie, but it's not our fault if somebody's unlucky. He was such a handsome prince, the squirrel lamented, and in the prime of his life.
Ugh, the jay screeched. If he hadn't been so standoffish and paid a bit of attention to us.
He was certainly not standoffish, the squirrel contradicted him. The magpie added, Nah, more than the other princes like him.
Stupid then, the jay laughed.
You're pretty stupid yourself, a crow called down from above them.
You can't talk about being stupid. The whole forest knows how stupid you are. Me? Retorted the jay in astonishment. No one can accuse me of being stupid. A bit forgetful sometimes, but I'm certainly not stupid.
Suit yourself, said the crow, now serious. Don't forget what I've just said, but bear in mind that it wasn't being haughty or stupid that cost the prince his life. It's 'cause you can't get away from him.
Ugh, screeched the jay. I don't like talking like this.
He flew away. The crow continued speaking. There's even a lot in my family who he's tricked. He kills anyone he feels like killing. There's nothing we can do about it. You've just got to keep a watch out for him, the magpie added. Yeah, we certainly do, said the crow sadly. Cheerio. She flew away, and her family went with her. Bambi looked around. His mother was no longer there. What are they talking about? He thought. I can't understand everything they're saying. Who is this he they're talking about? It must be that he that I saw in the woods that time. But he didn't kill me. Bambi thought of the prince whom he had just seen lying in front of him with a bloody, shredded shoulder. Now he was dead. Bambi walked on. The forest was again in song with 1,000 voices. The sun drove its broad beams of light through the treetops. Everywhere was light. The leaves began to stream. High in the air called the falcons. And here, close by, a woodpecker was laughing out loud, as if nothing had happened. Bambi did not become cheerful. He felt under threat of something dark. He could not understand how the others could be so gay and carefree when life was so hard and so dangerous. At that moment, he was gripped by the desire to get a long way away from here, to go deeper and deeper into the woods. He felt the urge to go to a place where the trees were at their densest, where he could find a corner to slide into, a place surrounded broad and far by the most impenetrable undergrowth, where he could not possibly be seen. He did not want to go back out onto that meadow. Something gently moved in the bushes beside him. Bambi was greatly startled. There in front of him stood the elder. There was something twitching in Bambi. He wanted to run away, but he took control of himself and remained. The elder looked at him with his big, deep eyes. Were you there when it happened? Yes, said Bambi quietly. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his mouth. Where is your mother? The elder asked. Bambi answered, still speaking quietly. I don't know. The elder continued to look at him. And you're not calling out for her? Bambi looked into that venerable icy gray face, looked up at the elder's majestic crown, and suddenly found himself full of courage. I can be by myself too, he said. The elder looked at him for a while, and then softly he said, Are you not the little one who, not very long ago, was crying for his mother? Bambi felt slightly ashamed, but continued to be courageous.
Yes, that was me,
he admitted. The elder looked at him in silence, and it seemed to Bambi that these deep eyes were watching him with more tenderness.
You told me off for it, Elder Prince, he exclaimed, for not being able to be by myself. I can do now, though.
The elder looked at Bambi, examining him, and smiled, very slightly, barely noticeable. But Bambi did notice.
Elder Prince, he asked trustingly, what happened back there? I can't understand it. Who is this he they're all talking about?
He stopped, shocked at the dark look that bade him to be silent. They said nothing for a while. The elder stopped looking at Bambi and stared into the distance. Then he said slowly, "Listen for yourself. Smell for yourself. Watch for yourself. Learn for yourself." He raised the crown on his head even higher. "Farewell," he said. Then nothing more. And then he had disappeared. Bambi, dismayed, stayed where he was and wanted to give up hope. But the prince's farewell was still in his ears and gave him some comfort. Farewell, the elder had said, so he wasn't cross with him. Bambi was filled with pride, felt that he had been lifted out of something that was formal and serious. Yes, life was hard and full of danger. Let it bring whatever it wants. He would learn somehow to bear all of it. Slowly, he walked deeper into the woods. The leaves were falling from the big oak tree at the edge of the meadow. They were falling from all the trees. One of the branches of the oak was much higher up than the others, and it stretched a long way out over the meadow. At its tip, there sat 2 leaves together. "Things ain't like they used to be," said one of the leaves. "They ain't," the other answered. "There were so many of us last night who... we're just about the only ones left here on this branch." "You never know who it's going to happen to next," said the first. "Even when it was nice and warm, and the sunshine gave you some heat, you get a storm or a cloudburst sometimes, and lots of us got torn off then. Even them that were still young. You never know who it's going to happen to next." "You don't get much sunshine these days," the second leaf sighed. "And even when the sun does shine, there's no strength to it. You've got to get your strength from somewhere else." "Do you think it's true?" pondered the first. "Is it true that other leaves will come along and take our place once we've gone? And then another lot, and then another lot?" "Course it's true," whispered the second. "Only we can't work out how. It's above what we can understand, that is." "It'd make you really sad and all," the first added. They remained silent for a while. Then the first said quietly to himself, "What do you have to go away for anyway?" The second asked, "What happens to us after we've fallen?" "We sink down." "And what is it? What's down there?" The first answered, "I don't know. Some say one thing, others say something different. Nobody knows, really." The second asked, "Do you think you feel anything? Do you think you know anything about yourself when you're down there?" The first answered, "Who can say? None of them who've gone down there has ever come back to tell us." They were again silent for a while. Then the first leaf said tenderly to the other, "Don't get yourself all upset about it. Here, you're shivering. Look." "Oh, don't bother about that," the second answered. "Anything makes me shiver these days. You just don't feel properly attached to where you are, do you?" "We'd better stop talking about things like that," said the first leaf. "Yeah, we'd better leave it," the other replied. "Only, what we going to talk about now, then?" They became silent, but after a short time resumed the subject. "Who do you think's going to be the first of us to go down there, then?" "It won't be for a while yet," the first assured him. "Let's just think about how beautiful it used to be, how wonderfully beautiful. When the sun came out and burned us so hot it seemed we'd just swell up with all the good health it gave us. Remember? And then there was the dew early in the morning, and the lime trees. Wonderful nights." "The nights are horrible now," whined the second. "They never seem to come to an end." "We can't complain now," said the first leaf gently. "We've lived longer than so many others." "Have I changed much?" the second leaf asked, shyly but empathetically. "Not a bit," the first assured him. "What, 'cause I've gone all yellow and ugly?" "No, it's gone a bit different for me." "Oh, give it over," the second contradicted. "No, honest," the first repeated empathetically. "It's true what I'm telling you."
You're as lovely as you were the very first day. Might be a few yellow stripes here and there, but not so's you'd notice. But they just make you look all the lovelier. Honest. Well, thank you, the second leaf whispered, feeling quite touched. I'm not sure I believe you. Well, not everything, but thank you for it. You are so good to me, and you always have been. It's only now that I'm starting to understand how good you've always been to me. Oh, stop it now, said the first, and became silent himself. He could not talk any more because he was upset. Now they were both silent. The hours passed. A damp wind blew cold and hostile through the treetops. Oh, now, said the second leaf. His voice broke off. He was gently removed from his place and fluttered down to the earth. Winter had come.
Bambi noticed that the world had changed. It was hard for him to get by in this altered world. They had all been living like rich people, and now they began to find themselves in poverty. But wealth was all that Bambi had ever known. He took it as a matter of course to be surrounded by the greatest excess and the finest luxuries on all sides, to have no worries about finding food, to sleep in a beautiful room hung with green that no one could see into, and to walk about in a majestically smooth, glossy red coat. Everything was different now, and he had not really noticed it, not properly. The change which had taken place had been, for him, just a sequence of short-lived appearances. He found it entertaining when milky white veils of mist drew the morning dampness up from the meadow, or when they would suddenly sink down from the twilight sky. They were so beautiful as they dissipated in the sunlight. He liked the frost, too, which surprised him when he saw the ground in the meadow strewn with white. He spent much time luxuriating in the sound of his grown-up relatives, the stags, as they shouted. The whole forest would rumble from the voices of these kings. Bambi would listen and be very afraid, but his heart would thump in admiration whenever he heard this thunderous call. He thought about the crowns worn by these kings, so big and with so many branches like a majestic oak, and he would think their voices were just as powerful as their crowns. Their imperious commands rolled out in the deepest tones, the monstrous groans of noble blood as it rushed around their bodies and seethed with the ancient power of yearning, haughtiness, and pride. Whenever Bambi heard these voices, he felt overwhelmed by them, but he was proud to have such distinguished relatives. At the same time, he felt a peculiar, excited irritation at their being so unapproachable. That hurt him, that humiliated him, although he did not know exactly why or how, or even how he could come any closer to knowing. It was only when the king's time for love-making was over, and their thunderous cries were silent, that Bambi started paying attention to other things once more. When he walked through the woods by night or lay in his room by day, he heard the whisperings of the leaves as they fell through the trees, the rustling sounds as they trickled down through the air from every treetop, every twig, were incessant. The gentle silvery light of the moon ran continuously down to the earth. It was wonderful to wake up to it, and it was delicious to go to sleep with this mysterious, sad whispering. The leaves at that time lay deep and loose on the ground, and when you walked through them, they crackled loudly, and they rustled quietly. It was fun to have to push them aside with each step because their layers were so deep. They made a shh noise that was very fine, very light, and silvery. This was also very useful, as during these times, there was no need to make great effort with listening and smelling. Everything could be heard from a long way off. The leaves rustled from the slightest movement. They cried out, "Shh!" Who could possibly sneak up on you? No one. But then came the rain. From early morning to late in the evening, it poured down. It struck and splattered from late in the evening and all through the night until back to the morning, eased off for a little while, and then began again with new strength. The air seemed full of cold water. The whole world seemed full of it. Your mouth was filled with water if you only tried to gather a few blades of grass, and if you pulled at a bush, then water would gush down into your eyes and up your nose. The leaves on the ground would no longer rustle. They lay there soft and heavy, pressed down by the rain, and made no sound at all. Bambi, for the first time, learned how vexing it was to have water stream down on you all through the day and all through the night, and to be soaked to the skin. He was still not very cold, but he yearned for warmth, and he thought it was miserable to have to move about while soaked through and through. But then, when the stormy weather came down from the north, Bambi learned what it really means to be cold. It was little help to cuddle up close to his mother. At first, of course, he liked it very much to lie there and be nice and warm, at least on one side. But the stormy winds raged all through the night and all through the day and all through the forest. It seemed to be driven by an incomprehensible ice-cold fury, an insane rage that wanted to tear all the trees up by the roots and carry them away, or to destroy them in some other way. The trees roared as they put up powerful resistance. They fought bravely against this immense attack. You could hear their long, drawn-out groans, the sighs of their creaking. There was a loud bang when one of their mighty boughs split, the angry crack when, here and there, the trunk of a tree would break, the cry of pain from all its wounds as its body was overpowered, split, and killed. But then it became impossible to hear anything more, as the storm fell onto the forest with even greater violence, and its roars drowned out any other voice. Bambi now understood that a period of need and poverty had begun. He saw how much the rain and storms had changed the world. There were now no leaves on any of the trees or bushes. They stood there robbed of all they had. Their whole body was naked and could be clearly seen. They looked pitiful as they stretched their naked brown arms up to the sky. The grass on the meadow was limp and dark brown, and so short it seemed to have been burnt to the ground. Even the place where Bambi and his mother slept seemed pitiful and bare now. Since its green walls had disappeared, it offered no privacy, and the wind blew in from every side. One day, a young magpie flew over the meadow. Something white and cold fell into her eye, then another, and laid a light veil over her sight. Little soft, dazzling white flakes were dancing all around her. The magpie flapped her wings and nearly stopped, but then directed herself upward and went higher in the sky. In vain. The soft, cool flakes were there. Again and again they fell onto her and into her eyes. Once again she directed herself upward and rose even higher. "Just don't bother, love," called a crow from above her, who was flying in the same direction. "Just give it up. You can't fly high enough to get out of these flakes. That's snow, isn't it?" "Snow?" said the magpie in amazement as she struggled against each new flurry that came at her. "Well, yeah," said the crow. "Winter's here. That's snow, that is." "Forgive me," answered the magpie. "I only left the nest in May. I don't know what winter's like." "Yeah, there's a lot like that," the crow observed. "You'll soon find out, though." "Well, if that's what snow is," thought the magpie, "I'd like to sit down for a little while." She went down and sat on a twig on an elder tree and shook herself. The crow flew lazily on. At first, Bambi was pleased to see the snow. The air was still and mild. The white stars floated in the sky, and everything in the world looked entirely new. It had become lighter, even gayer, thought Bambi, and for the brief periods when the sun came out, everything lit up. The white covering sparkled and shone with such power that it was quite dazzling. But Bambi soon stopped being pleased about the snow, as it was becoming harder and harder to find food. You had to scrape the snow aside, and that took a lot of effort before a small patch of limp grass was exposed. And the snow cut into your legs, too, so that you had to be careful not to get your feet injured. Gobo already had done. But of course, that is what Gobo was like. He was never able to endure very much, and he caused his mother a lot of worry. They were together now almost all of the time, and they also had more company than previously. Aina would often call by with her children. Morena, a girl who was nearly grown up, had also begun to mix in their circle, but it was probably old Mrs. Netla who came by for a chat most often. She was quite alone and had an opinion about everything. "No," she said. "I want to have nothing more to do with children. That's a pleasure that I've really had enough of." Then Feline would always say,
"Why is that then when it's a pleasure?"
And Mrs. Netla would pretend to be cross and say, "It's a bad sort of pleasure, and I've had enough of it." Everyone enjoyed chatting very much. They sat next to each other and talked. The children never had as much to listen to. Even one or two of the princes came and kept company with them now. At first it felt a little awkward, especially as the children were still somewhat shy with them. But that passed quite quickly, and then there was a pleasant atmosphere. Bambi admired Prince Rono, who was an impressive gentleman, and he felt tempestuous love for the young, beautiful Caris. They had cast off their crowns, and Bambi would often stare at the 2 round slate-gray discs on their heads, where glamour, splendor, and many tender points could be seen. Caris seemed very elegant and distinguished. It was tremendously exciting when one of the princes would tell him about what had happened to him. On Rono's left foreleg there was a big lump which was now overgrown with fur. He would often ask, "Have you ever noticed how I limp on this leg?" Everyone was prompt to assure him that no one had ever noticed any limp at all. That was what Rono wanted to hear, and it really was true to say that it was barely noticeable. "Yes," he would continue then, "I escaped from something very dangerous that day." And so Rono would go on to recount how he had been taken by surprise by him and hurled fire at him. But it was only here, on his leg, that he had been hit. It hurt nearly enough to drive him crazy. No wonder. The bone had been shattered. But Rono did not panic. He got up and went on just 3 legs. He kept going despite the pain, as he was very well aware that he was being chased. He ran and ran until night fell. Then he allowed himself some rest. But the following morning, he moved on again until he felt he was in safety. Then he groomed himself, hidden and alone, and waited for the wound to close up. Eventually, he came out of his place of safety, and he was a hero. He had a limp, but that was barely noticeable. Now, when they were together in one place so often and for so long, when so many stories were told, Bambi heard more about him than he ever had before. They talked about how horrible he was to look at. Nobody could bear looking into this pale face. This was something that Bambi already knew from his own experience. They even talked about the smell of him that spread all around. And here, too, Bambi would have been able to contribute to the discussion if he had not been too well brought up to join in with the conversations of grown-ups. They said the scent was a rather puzzling sort, always changing, but instantly recognizable as it was always remarkably stimulating, unidentifiable, mysterious, but in itself rather disgusting. They talked about him only needing 2 legs to walk on, and about the wonderful strength of both his hands. Some of them did not exactly know what hands are, but Mrs. Netla explained it to them. "I don't see anything surprising about it. The squirrel can do everything you've just mentioned and does it in just the way he wants to, and every little mouse can do the same." She turned her head disrespectfully away from them. "Oh," the others exclaimed, and they made her understand that it was far from being the same thing. But Mrs. Netla was not to be intimidated. "And what about the falcon?" she declared. "What about the buzzard and the owl? They've only got 2 legs, and when they want to take a hold of something, as you call it, they just stand on 1 leg and hold it with the other. That's a lot harder to do, and I'm sure he can't do it." Mrs. Netla was not in any way inclined to admire anything about him. She hated him with all her heart. "He's disgusting," she said, and nothing would change her mind. And there was nobody who contradicted her, as there was nobody who found him very lovable. But the matter became even more confusing as they talked about it, saying he had a third hand, not just two hands, but a third hand as well. Mrs. Netla's reply was curt. "That's just an old wives' tale," she concluded. "I just don't believe it." Now Rono joined in. "So what?" he asked. "And what do you think it was that he used to shatter my leg? Just tell me that, will you?" Mrs. Netla gave a glib retort. "That's your affair, my love. He's never shattered anything of mine." Auntie Aina said, "I've seen lots of different things in my life, and I think there must be something in it if he insists he's got a third hand." Young Karis observed politely, "I can only agree with you there. There's a crow who's a friend of mine." He stopped in embarrassment for a short while and looked at all the people there as if he were afraid of being laughed at. But when he saw they were listening to him and giving him all their attention, he continued, "The crow is exceptionally talented, I can't deny that. She's astonishingly talented. She told me that he really does have 3 hands, but not all the time. It's that third hand, the crow told me, that's the nasty one. It grows out of him like the other 2. He carries it hanging on his shoulder. The crow says she can always tell whether he or any of his kind is dangerous or not. If he comes along without that third hand, then he isn't dangerous." Mrs. Netla laughed. "This crow of yours is just stupid, Karis. Take it from me, my love. If she is as clever as she thinks she is, she'd know that he's always dangerous. Always." But the others had something to say, too. "But there are some of them who are not dangerous at all," Bambi's mother thought. "You can see it straight away." "So what?" asked Mrs. Netla. "Do you just stand there till they come up to you and say hello to them?" Bambi's mother answered softly, "Of course I don't just stand there. I run away." And Feline burst out with, "You should always run away." Everyone laughed. They continued talking about this third hand, and as they did so, they became more serious, and the sense of horror of it came among them again. Whatever it was, a third hand or something different, it was something terrible, something they could not understand. Most of them knew about it only from what they had been told by others, but some of them had seen it with their own eyes. He would stand there, a long way off, without moving. There was no way of explaining what he did or how it happened, but there would suddenly be a bang like thunder. Fire sprayed out, and even at that distance from him, you would collapse with your breast torn open, and you would die. They all lowered their heads while she told them of this, as if they were pressed down by some dark force that had some inexplicable power over them. They listened eagerly to the many different accounts of seeing him, and every story was full of horror, full of blood and suffering. They took all this in and still wanted to hear more of what was being said. Stories that must have been made up, all fairy tales and legends they heard from their grandfathers and great-grandfathers. And as they listened, they unconsciously learned, while still afraid, about how to make peace with this dark world, or at least to run away from it. "How does that happen?" asked young Karis, quite dispirited. "That he can be so far away and still knock you down?" "Didn't your clever crow explain that to you?" sneered Mrs. Netla. "No," said Karis with a smile. "She says she's often seen it, but no one knows how to explain it." "Well, he can even knock the crows down from the tree when he feels like it," observed Rono. "And he knocks the pheasants down from the sky," Auntie Aina added. Bambi's mother said, "He throws his hand out there. That's what my grandmother told me." "Does he really?" Mrs. Netla asked. "And what is it that makes that horrible thunderous noise then?" "When his hand tears away from his body," Bambi's mother explained, "there's a flash of fire, and it makes a bang like thunder. On the inside, that's all he is. Just fire." "Excuse me," said Rono. "There is some truth in saying he's nothing but fire on the inside, but it's wrong to say it's his hand he uses." A strike from a hand could never cause injuries like that. You can see it for yourselves. It's much more likely to be a tooth that he throws at us. Think about it. That would explain a lot. And so you die because he bites you. Young Karis breathed a deep sigh. Will he never stop chasing us down? Then Morena spoke. The girl was now nearly an adult. That means that one day he'll come and join us and be as gentle as we are. He'll play games with us. Everyone in the forest will be happy and we'll make peace together. Mrs. Netla shrieked with laughter. It's best if he just stays where he is and leaves us alone. You shouldn't say things like that, Auntie Yena admonished her. And why not then? Retorted Mrs. Netla as she became more heated. That's not really something I could imagine. Make peace with him. He's been murdering us for as long as we've been able to think, and our sisters and our mothers and our brothers. For all the time we've been in the world, he never leaves us in peace. He kills us whenever he sees us, and you want to make peace with him? That's just stupid. Morena looked at everyone with her gently sparkling eyes wide open. There's nothing stupid about making peace, she said. We've got to make peace. I'm going to get something to eat, said Mrs. Netla as she turned around and ran off. The winter went on. Sometimes it became milder, but then the snow would come again, and each time it did, it lay higher on the ground so that it was impossible to scrape it away. Worst of all was when it became warm enough for it to thaw, and then the snow that had melted into water would freeze when the night came. There would be a thin layer of ice which you could easily slip on. It would also often break so that the sharp splinters would cut the deer's tender fetlocks, cut them bloody. But now there was a hard frost which had lasted for days. The air was clean and thin such as it had never been before, and the frost was full of strength. It began to tinkle with a sound that was fine and high. It was so cold that the air sang. Everything was quiet in the forest, but something shocking happened every day. One time, the crows attacked the hare's little son, who was already lying down ill, and killed him in a gruesome way. His cries of pain were long and pitiful, and could be heard by all. Bambi's friend the hare was away at the time, but when he had heard the sad news, he could not contain himself. Another time, the squirrel was running around with a serious wound on his neck from where the polecat had bitten him. By some miracle, the squirrel had been able to get away from him. He could not speak because of the pain, but he ran between all the twigs and branches. Everyone could see it. He ran like a madman. From time to time, he would stop, sit down, raise his forepaws in confusion, take hold of his head in his shock and his suffering, and as he did so, his blood gushed over his white breast and turned it red. He ran around like this for an hour. Then he suddenly collapsed, fell hard against the branches of the tree, and fell, dying, into the snow. A pair of magpies immediately came down on him and began their feasting. There was also the time when the fox attacked the pheasant and tore him to bits, even though everyone liked and respected the pheasant for his beauty and his strength. His death was a cause for concern far and wide, and everyone felt sorry for his inconsolable widow. The fox had snatched the pheasant out of the snow he had settled in, and where he thought he was well hidden. No one could feel safe anymore, as these things happened in broad daylight. It seemed that the penury they were suffering would never come to an end, and it spread bitterness and ruthlessness all around. It made all experience worthless. It undermined the conscience, destroyed all trust and all good manners. There was no mercy anymore, no peace, no holding back. It's impossible even to think that it might ever get any better, Bambi's mother sighed. Auntie Yena sighed too. And it's impossible to think that it ever was any better. Don't be silly, said Morena, looking straight ahead. I think about how lovely it used to be all the time. Listen, Mrs. Netla said to Auntie Yena. Your little one is shivering, isn't he? And she pointed to Gobo.
Does he always shiver like that?
Sad to say, answered Auntie Aina, somewhat worried. He's been shivering like that for several days now.
Well then,
said Mrs. Netla, in the open way she had of saying things.
I'm only glad I haven't got any children anymore. If he was my little one, I'd be worried about whether he gets through the winter.
Gobo indeed did not look well. He was weak. He always had been less strong than Bambi or Feline, and had not grown as fast as those two. But now, he looked worse from day to day. He could not keep his food down, what little there was of it now. He was in continual pain. So, with the cold and the difficulties of life, he had lost all of what strength he had. He shivered all the time and could barely hold himself upright. Everyone looked at him with concern. Mrs. Netla went to him and gave him a friendly push in the side.
Now, don't you be sad, she told him sternly. That's not right for a young prince, and it's bad for your health.
She moved away from him because she did not want anyone to know how concerned she was. Rono was sitting in the snow to one side, but now he jumped up. I don't know what that is, he mumbled, and looked all around. Everyone paid attention. What is what? They all asked. I don't really know, Rono repeated, but I'm worried. All of a sudden, I'm worried. It's as if there was something wrong. Karas had tested the air. I can't smell anything odd, he declared. They all stood there, listening, and testing the air. Nothing. I can't smell anything, they all said, one after the other. But still, Rono persisted. You can say what you like, but there is something wrong. The crows have been calling, said Morena. They're calling again now, added Feline quickly, but by now the others had heard them too. Look, that's them flying, Karas pointed out to the others. Everyone looked up. Above the treetops, crows were flying away in swarms. They came inwards from the outermost edge of the woods, from wherever it was that the danger was approaching, and spoke anxiously to each other up there. It was clear that there was an exceptional disturbance of some sort. There, wasn't I right? Asked Rono. You can see that there's something going on. What do we do? Whispered Bambi's mother uneasily. We get away from here now, insisted Auntie Aina in alarm. Wait, commanded Rono. Wait? With all the children here? Auntie Aina contradicted him. When Gobo won't be able to run? All right then, Rono conceded. You get away from here with your children. I don't see any point in it, of course, but I don't want to have you blaming me for it later. He was serious and decisive. Gobo, Feline, come this way. Not too fast. Go slowly. Stay behind me, Auntie Aina admonished them. She, with her children, slipped away. A time went by. They stood still, listening and smelling the air.
That's all we need, Mrs. Netla began. We've got to put up with all of this, and now this is all we need.
She was very cross. Bambi looked at her and felt like she was thinking of something dreadful. Now the magpies were also coming out of the same part of the thicket as the crows had come, 3 or 4 at a time. Look out! Look out! They cried. They still could not be seen, but their loud warnings could be heard one after another. Look out! Look out! Now they came nearer, continued to flap their wings, shocked and disturbed. Aka! The jays cried, yapping loud in their alarm. Suddenly, and all at the same time, all the deer came together. It had seared through them as if they had been hit by something. Now they stood still and breathed heavily. It was him. There was a frenzy of smelling in the air like never before. There was now nothing left to examine. The smell entered their noses, befogged their senses, and made their hearts freeze. The magpies were still playing about. The jays above them were yapping, but now there was an agitated movement everywhere. The tits swished between the branches, hundreds of little feathery balls, and they chirruped. Away! Away! The blackbirds rushed dark and lightning fast above the trees with a long drawn-out scream of chirping as they flew. The deer looked down at the white snow through the network of bare twigs on the bushes and saw a confused rush of small, shadowy figures as they ran to and fro. They were the pheasants. Further away there was a shimmer of red. That was actually the fox, but no one was afraid of him now, for continuous broad waves of the dreadful smell wafted to them, breathing alarm into their minds.
and uniting them all into one crazy fear and into one feverish desire to flee, to save themselves. This mysterious, overpowering scent permeated the wood with such power that they could tell that he was not alone this time, but seemed to have come with all his friends. And things were at their most extreme. They did not move. They watched the tits as they hurried away with frantic flapping of their wings. The blackbirds, the squirrels rushed away, leaping from one treetop to another. They thought these little ones had no good reason to be afraid, but they nonetheless understood why they fled when he could be smelt. There was no creature in the forest that could bear to have him anywhere near. Now our friend the hare hopped away hesitantly, sat still, and hopped further. "How does it look?" Karis called to him impatiently. But our friend the hare just looked around, madness in his eyes, and could not speak straight away. He was very disturbed. "What's the point of asking?" said Rono grimly. Our friend the hare gasped for breath. "We're surrounded," he said in a monotone. "There's no way out on any side. He is everywhere." Just then they heard his voice. 20 times, 30 times he called out, "Ho ho, ha ha!" It rang out and shook them more than thunder and lightning. It struck the trunks of the trees, which trumpeted the sound out. It brought them horror. It threw them down. A distant rustling and cracking of the undergrowth as the bushes were pushed apart, and the sound forced itself over to them. The screams and bangs of twigs as they broke. He was coming. He was coming right here, into the thicket. Now, behind them, they could hear short whistles and trills. Already there was a pheasant there, standing up as he heard his steps. They heard the flapping of the pheasant's wings fading as he rose high into the air. A flash and a clap of thunder. Quiet. Then, the muffled sound of something hitting the ground. "The pheasant has fallen," said Bambi's mother with a shudder. "The first," added Rono. Then Morena, the young girl, spoke. "There are many of us who are going to die very soon. I might be one of them." No one listened to her. Now the great terror was among them. Bambi tried to think, but the raging noise which he was raising higher and higher tore all his thoughts apart. Bambi could hear nothing but this noise, a noise that made you numb. And in among all this howling, bellowing, and banging, he could hear the thump of his own heart. All he felt was curiosity, and he was completely unaware that all his limbs were shaking. Now and then, his mother came close to his ear and said, "Stay with me," she shouted. But in all that uproar, it seemed to Bambi that she was whispering. This, "stay with me," offered some support. It held him fast as if he were held in place with a chain. Otherwise, he would have run away without a second thought, and he always heard it again just when he would have lost self-control, fled. He looked around. There was a crowd of many different people running around in a blind panic between each other. A pair of weasels ran past, slender lines like snakes which are nearly impossible to follow with the eye. A polecat listened, spellbound for all information he could get from the stuttering, confused hare. The fox stood there among the disordered rush of the pheasants. They paid no attention to him, ran right past his nose, and he paid no attention to them. Without becoming excited, his head stretched forward, his ears pointed high, his nose working hard. He strained himself to hear through the tumult as it came closer. The only thing moving was his tail. It looked as if he were straining to think. A pheasant hurried past, out from behind, out of the most serious danger, and he was in panic. "Don't go up there," he shouted to the other birds. "Don't go up there. Just run. Don't let them get you. Nobody go up there. Just run, run, run." He kept on repeating the same thing as if he were trying to warn himself, but he no longer knew what he was saying. A clamor of "ho ho, ha ha" seemed to come from somewhere quite close. "Don't let them get you," called the pheasant. At the same time, his voice suddenly became a whistle-like sobbing. With a loud rattle, he spread his wings and flew upwards. Bambi watched him as he went, flapping his wings loudly, flying up directly and steeply between the trees, his resplendent body glittering with its metallic dark blue gold-brown sheen, as majestic as a precious gem. His long tail feathers swept proudly behind him like a train of a gown. The curt thunderclap rang out sharp. The pheasant in the sky collapsed suddenly into himself, twisting himself round as if trying to snap at his feet with his beak, and hurtled heavily to the ground. He fell in the middle of the others, and moved no more. Now no one was able to stay calm. They all rushed around away from each other. 5, 6 pheasants rose into the air with noisy clattering. "Don't go up there!" shouted the others as they ran. The thunderclap came again, 5 times, 6 times, and some of those who had flown in the air fell back to the ground, lifeless. "Now come with me," said Bambi's mother. Bambi looked up. Rono and Karis had already gone. Mrs. Netla had also disappeared. Only Morena was still with them. Bambi went with his mother. Morena demurely followed them. All around them there was upheaval, loud cracks, bellowing, and thunderclaps. Bambi's mother stayed calm. She was trembling just slightly, but she kept her thoughts together. "Bambi, my child," she said, "always stay right behind me. We've got to get out of here and across the clearing. But here inside, we need to go slowly." The bellowing became more hurried. The thunderclaps came 10, 12 times, thrown out by the hands of him. "Stop that," said Bambi's mother. "Don't run. Once we've gone past the clearing, then run. Run as fast as you can. And Bambi, my child, don't forget you shouldn't pay me any attention once we've reached the outside. Even if I fall, pay me no attention. Just keep going. Keep going. Do you understand, Bambi?" His mother made deliberate steps through the booming noise. The pheasants ran in all directions, pressed themselves into the snow, jumped out again, started to run once more. The whole family of the hare jumped here and there, sat down, ran again. No one spoke a word. They were all exhausted with their fear, crippled by all the bellowing and the thunderclaps. Ahead of Bambi and his mother, it was getting lighter. Through the cagework of the bushes shone the clearing. Behind them, getting closer and closer, there were startling bangs that rattled on the tree trunks, the crackling of twigs as they broke, the yells of ha-ha and ho-ho. Now their friend the hare with his 2 young rushed past close beside them and into the clearing. Bang! Ping! Bam! The thunder crashed. Bambi saw the hare did a somersault as he ran and fell with his pale belly facing upward, and then just lay there. He twitched a few more times, and then he was still. Bambi stood there, as if made of stone. But from behind he heard the shouts of, "There, there! Everyone just get out!" A widespread rustling of wings as they hurried unfurled, whistling, sobbing, swoosh of foliage, flapping. The pheasants rose up, lifted themselves up almost all at the same time like a straw in a sheaf. The air burst with many thunderclaps, and the muffled impact of the fallen could be heard as they hit the ground. The fine whistling of the survivors ran out as they flew away. Bambi stopped and looked back. There he was. He was coming out from the undergrowth, here and there again. He was appearing everywhere, striking everywhere, damaging the bushes, drumming on the tree trunks, and shouting terrifying cries. "Now," said his mother, "straight ahead, and don't come too close behind me." With one leap, she was out of the woods, so that the snow merely threw up a few flakes. Bambi hurried after her. They were attacked by the sound of thunder from every side. It was as if the earth had been ripped in half. Bambi saw nothing. He ran. It seemed to him that he saw his mother fall, although he did not know whether she really had done. He felt a veil around his eyes. It had been thrown over him by the fear of the thunderclaps booming all around him, which had now broken out. He was unable to think, unable to see. He ran. The clearing was now behind him. A new thicket took him in. From behind him came another shout, another sharp thunderclap, and in the twigs above, there was a very brief rattling, like a first spray of hailstones. Then it became quieter. Bambi ran. A pheasant with a twisted neck lay dying on the snow, twitching his wings weakly. As he heard Bambi approach, he stopped his spasmodic movements and whispered, "It's finished." Bambi paid him no attention and continued running. He found himself in a tangle of undergrowth that forced him to slow his pace and look for a path. He kicked around himself impatiently. "Over here," called somebody in a broken voice. Bambi had no choice but to follow it, and immediately found himself in a place where he could walk. But in front of him, somebody was struggling to get to her feet. It was the hare's wife. It was her who had called. "Do you think you could give me a little help?" she said. Bambi looked at her and was shocked. Her rear legs dragged lifeless through the snow, which was red and beginning to melt from the warm blood that dropped from her. She said once again, "Do you think you could give me a little help?" She spoke as if she were perfectly all right, relaxed and almost gay. "I don't know what's happened to me," she continued. "It's certainly not anything important, but at the moment, I can't walk." As she spoke, she sank down onto her side, and she was dead. Bambi once again was horrified, and he ran away. "Bambi!" He stopped abruptly. That was one of his own people. It was heard again. "Bambi? Is that you?" There was Gobo, stuck helplessly in the snow. He had no strength at all and could not even get onto his feet. He lay there as if he had been buried, and merely raised his head weakly. Bambi went over to him in some agitation. "Where's your mother, Gobo?" he gasped. "And where's Feline?" Bambi spoke quickly, agitated and impatient. In his anxiety, his heart continued to beat hard. "Mother and Feline had to go," answered Gobo in despair. He spoke gently, but as earnest and as wise as a grown-up. "They had to leave me lying here. I've had it. You've got to go too, Bambi." "Get up!" Bambi yelled. "Gobo, get up! You've been resting long enough. There isn't any more time for that. Get up! Come with me!" "No. Just leave it, Bambi," answered Gobo quietly. "I can't stand up. It's impossible. I wish I could come with you, you know that. But I'm just too weak." "What's going to happen to you then?" Bambi persisted. "I don't know. I expect I'll die," said Gobo simply. The shouting started again, and the sound of it came over to them. Between the shouts, new thunderclaps. Bambi was alarmed. There were rapid bangs and cracks from the undergrowth. Rumbling sped across the snow, and in among the uproar, young Karas came galloping over to them. "Run!" he called out when he saw Bambi there. "Don't just stand there. Anyone who can still run, run!" He went past them in an instant, and his headlong flight yanked Bambi along with him. Bambi was hardly aware whether he had started running or not, and it was only a little while later when he said, "Farewell, Gobo." But by that time, he was already too far away. Gobo could no longer hear him. He ran through the woods, penetrated by the noise and the thunderclaps that seemed to be seeking him out. He ran around until it was evening. When darkness swept down, it became quiet. There was soon a light wind blowing, helping to blow away that horrible storm that had been raging far and wide. But the terror remained. The first person Bambi saw whom he knew was Rono. His limp was worse than ever. "Over here where the oaks are," Rono said. "The fox is there lying wounded. I've just come past him. It's terrible the way he's suffering. He's biting at the snow and in the earth." "Have you seen my mother?" Bambi asked. "No," answered Rono shyly, and he quickly went away. Later in the night, Bambi came across Mrs. Netla with Feline. All three were very glad to see each other. "Have you seen my mother?" Bambi asked. "No," replied Feline. "I don't even know where my mother is."
"No," said Mrs. Netla cheerfully, "and that's a fine mess for me. I was glad when I didn't have to put up with children anymore, and now suddenly I've got 2 of them I've got to look after. Thanks a lot."
Bambi and Feline laughed. They started talking about Gobo. Bambi told them about how he had found him, and that made them so sad that they began to cry. But Mrs. Netla wouldn't allow them to cry.
"You've got to see that the most important thing now is to find something to eat. It's unheard of. We haven't had a bite to eat all day."
She led the 2 of them to a place where there was still some greenery, hanging low and still not quite dried out. Mrs. Netla was exceptionally well informed. She did not touch anything herself, but urged Bambi and Feline to take a good meal. At places where she knew there was grass, she pushed the snow aside and ordered them,
Here is a good place." Or she would say, "Wait, we can soon find something better than this."
But between giving this advice, she would grumble,
"This is so stupid. Children are so much trouble."
Suddenly they saw Auntie Aina coming, and they ran up to her. "Auntie Aina!" Bambi exclaimed. He was the first to have seen her. Feline was beside herself with joy and jumped up to her. "Mother!" But Aina was crying, and she was dead tired. "We've lost Gobo," she lamented. "I've been looking for him. I've been to his sleeping place out there in the snow where he collapsed. It was empty. He's gone. My poor little Gobo." Mrs. Netla grumbled.
"You better try to find out which way he went. That would be more sensible than crying."
"There are no tracks to show which way he went," said Auntie Aina. "But he left lots of tracks. He was there, where Gobo was sleeping." They were all silent. Then Bambi asked timidly, "Auntie Aina, have you seen my mother?" "No," replied Auntie Aina quietly. Bambi was never to see his mother again.